Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Arriving back in New York, the first thing Shiro did was to make her way to the temporary stall the guild had put up to distribute requests. Activating Phantom Path, Shiro sent a string of nanobots into the system without anyone realizing. Editing the status on the quests, Shiro made fake proof to confirm that the quests were complete. With that done, she left the area. Amen? She felt her phone vibrate for a moment, notifying her of a text. Freya, sorry about the late reply. We'll meet near the north entrance of New York tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'll tell you about what we're doing when we meet. Shiro, okay, thank you. But I want to ask, am I allowed to get one more of my friends into the faction? Her name is Sylvia and she's a member of my party. Freya, it depends. What level is she and what class? Shiro, she's level 45 and is a healer. Freya, age? Shiro, no idea, but she's talented. I can guarantee it. Freya, in that case, she'll have the same privileges as Lyrica and Madison if that's all right. Shiro, perfect. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow. Freya, see you tomorrow. Closing her phone, Shiro smiled lightly since it meant that Sylvia could join them without any problems. Now once we pack everything up, we can go to the branch office of the faction. She mused to herself. Arriving at the dorms, Shiro saw both Lyrica and Madison talking to each other. Seems like they're done. Yo. Shiro greeted. Turning around, Lyrica froze up slightly seeing Shiro in a different hairstyle, outfit, and overall aura. It felt warmer, like the kind of feeling a kind older sister would give. Shiro? She muttered in confusion. That is my name, yes. Shiro replied, tilting her head in confusion. If you're confused, Shiro, I believe it's because it feels like you've changed into an entirely new persona along with your outfit. Madison shrugged. Ah, I almost forgot I still have this outfit on. Shiro looked down in realization. She found an isolated area and surrounded herself with metal to make sure that other people couldn't see her change. Changing into the new outfit that Aram gifted her, Shiro unbraided her hair and let it flow freely. Adjusting her aura back to what it was normally, she returned to the duo. Is this better? Shiro asked with a shrug. Yeah, it is. I swear, I don't get how you can adjust your persona so easily. Madison asked in curiosity. Well, it's like when people get too deep into a role and they stick with it. I just maintain that sensation, which makes it seem like I've always been like that. Shiro replied. Her acting skills were all self-taught from her time in the labs. She couldn't blatantly glare at the scientists with death glares now, could she? Then what about your current persona? Madison asked. Shiro narrowed her eyes and stayed silent. A sliver of killing intent started to leak out as both Lyrica and Madison felt a shiver down their spine. Are you that curious? Shiro asked blandly. Madison started to regret her question after feeling the temperature drop around them. Even Yuan Tian started to become worried since he knew the kind of power Shiro could exhibit. Flashing behind the duo, Shiro held their shoulders, causing them to tense up in fear. Ha ha ha, of course it's my real persona. Shiro had a *T eating grin on her face as the previous pressure disappeared like a gust of wind. Oh my god. I thought I touched the Pandora's box then. Madison cried out in relief. AI, don't worry about it. Shiro shrugged and sat down. Though I won't deny that I have my own little secrets that I can't tell you. Shiro chuckled and put her index finger on her lips. Well, it's only natural that we have our secrets. Lyrica smiled. Both of you have secrets? Madison widened her eyes after hearing this new piece of information. Why? You don't? Both Lyrica and Shiro asked with a tilt in their heads. First, that's King creepy when the both of you do it in sync. Second, no, I don't have a secret since before meeting you two, I was relatively normal, you know. Madison pouted slightly. Ho ho, so you're abnormal now? Shiro asked with a grin. If having a hidden class is normal, then yes. But if it isn't normal, then no. Madison shrugged after a short moment. True that. I wonder if I'll get a hidden class when I level up. Shiro muttered whilst leaning back. Wait, if Shiro gets a hidden class, Can't she basically destroy everything that comes her way? Of course she's already destroying everything that comes her way, but wouldn't she dominate them even more? Lyrica asked with a raised eyebrow. They both looked at Shiro with questioning stares. What? At higher levels, it's going to be a lot harder to kill monsters and humans that are multiple levels higher than you. It's easier now since the stat disparity between levels aren't big, but the gap will get wider the higher level you are. Shiro replied. Then how come you can kill C-class monsters around level 55 and 60 with ease? Madison replied, throwing the ball back into her court. Well, experience? Shiro shrugged. The truth was naturally due to her monster title that gave her twice the strength of normal level 48s. Bullsh asterisk T. Both the girls replied at the same time. Who knows? Maybe I'm one of those people that reset my level to get better classes. Shiro shrugged. Then does that mean you're like a 100-plus-year-old granny? Who the F asterisk CK are you calling a granny? Shiro replied instantly as if it was a conditioned reflex. Silence followed after her small outburst. Asterisk cough. Well, I can say that I am definitely not older than you right now. Shiro corrected herself. Her body wasn't older than them, but her mental age was. Right now? Both Lyrica and Madison questioned in suspicion. How about I give you 2 questions to try to determine my current age? Shiro asked, resting her chin on her palms and smiled playfully. 2 questions? All right. We'll discuss this between us first, is that okay? Lyrica asked. Go ahead. Shiro nodded. After whispering to each other for a short while, they stopped and nodded. First question, are you older or younger than 13? Lyrica asked. Younger, Shiro chuckled. Surprised face? Bullsh asterisk T. Nope, it's the truth, Shiro said with a smile. The duo paused for a second to think about their next questions. If your age is under 13, is it an even or odd number? Lyrica asked. Since I'm not even a year old yet in this body, I would count as only a few months old. It is an even number. Shiro replied. Is it 12? Fufufu, no more questions. Shiro grinned and stood up. So she's less than 13 and her age is an even number. Madison muttered in confusion. So, she's like the world's most powerful 12-year-old? Lyrica asked, turning to Madison. I think so. I mean, she can't be 10 or less than 10 now, can she? It could be possible. It's Shiro after all. Lyrica replied after a short moment of silence. Little did they know, she wasn't even 1 year old yet. Now if you girls have finished discussing what my age is, we should go look for somewhere to sleep tonight. We'll be going to meet up with other faction members tomorrow, Shiro said, informing them of tomorrow's plans. Shiro found a decent-sized plot of grass that was perfect for a tent. We're only staying here for 1 more night. No need to be fancy about it, Shiro thought whilst setting up the tent. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. The next morning, the trio woke up rather early. For Shiro, it was normal, but both Lyrica and Madison was a little groggy. You two should get used to early nights. Isn't that right, Yuan Tian? Shiro chuckled and looked towards Yuan Tian, who stood behind them in a butler's suit. Indeed, princess. One should learn how to operate at around 6 hours of sleep on average, and that is being generous. Yuan Tian replied with an understanding nod. Well, one of you is dead already, and the other one is the abnormal amongst abnormals. Madison rolled her eyes. Haha, I won't deny that I was dead once. Yuan Tian chuckled. Say, why do you call her princess? Also, Shiro, why do you address yourself as princess sometimes? Are you royalty? Lyrica asked, curious to see if being royalty was a part of her background. Not really. I just call myself princess because of the titles I have. Plus, I like it fufufu, Shiro smiled. I just call her princess because she addresses herself as such. Yuan Tian followed up. So it's just role play, but he's taking it seriously? Maybe, haha. Shiro laughed since they weren't wrong. She did like the title of princess. Before they went to the meeting point, since it wasn't time yet, they needed to get breakfast at one of the stalls that the public had set up. Shiro just bought a simple sandwich that she ate. Looking at Shiro, who was eating lollipops after just eating a sandwich, Lyrica and Madison couldn't help but warn her of her bad diet of living off lollipops. Nope, these give my sustenance. Shiro chuckled. She wasn't wrong. The only food that fed her was indeed her mana stone lollipops. While she could feed directly off monster corpses due to them dispersing into mana, it wasn't as filling as mana stones. Meanwhile, Ian was enjoying her C-ranked mana stones off by the side, ignoring everything that was going on. With the amount of C-ranked mana stones she ate, her level increased to 49. Well, you're not gonna grow if you just eat lollipops, Madison replied. And you're saying you grew those lumps of fat because of food and not class upgrade? Shiro retorted. Cough. Mine's a special case. Madison replied with an embarrassed cough. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro eventually dismissed it since she was going to have a class up soon. Madison sighed in relief seeing Shiro not do anything. Just so you know, if I don't grow up anymore in my next class upgrade, I'm going to rip those right off your chest. Shiro grinned. Let me enjoy my peace of mind longer, please. Madison cried out. But why would you want an adult body, Shiro? You're younger than 13, aren't you? I would rather enjoy the moment. Lyrica asked. Well, if I have an adult body, I can fight better, can't I? My reach is absolute crap right now, Shiro said, stretching out her hand as a demonstration. Why is everything you think of linked to fighting? Madison sighed. Because fighting is life. Live longer, survive, defend yourself, and even simple things like feeding yourself in this world requires you to fight for it. Shiro shrugged. Well, she ain't wrong now, is she? Lyrica nodded. They continued to chat for a bit while Shiro waited for them to finish their food. During the talk, the question of whether or not Yuan Tian needed to eat popped up. All he said was no due to the fact that he is now technically a monster and can live off mana. As for how he gains that mana, he knows a few skills and techniques for gathering mana from the environment to sustain himself. Of course, he stores it as a battery so that he can use it in times of need. If he was using mana like how Shiro was, he'll probably need to eat mana stones constantly as well. Making their way to the gathering point, they picked up Sylvia on the way there since she was coming with them. Arriving at the location, Shiro was surprised to see a giant manta ray that had armor all over its body. Around the manta ray was Freya herself and a few new recruits. The recruits were naturally charmed by Shiro on sight. You're here. Freya smiled happily seeing Shiro arriving with the girls. She couldn't see Yuan Tian since he transformed himself back into spirit form and had disappeared from sight. We'll be going to the closest branch of the main guild, which is around a 5 hours trip north, even with the speed of our mount. She explained. These are the new members that had been recruited along with you during the tournament, she said, gesturing at the new recruits. Nice to meet you. My name is Shiro, and I believe I'm a guest elder if I remember correctly, Shiro said with a smile. Her voice was as if a bolt of lightning was shot through their bodies. A beautiful face paired with a charming voice made her irresistible for them. Of course, they didn't dare disrespect her since she was a guest elder. That meant she had the capabilities to take that role. You can talk now? Freya asked with disbelief written all over her face. From what she could remember, Shiro was a mute and needed her phone to communicate. Yes, I can. As for what happened, let's keep it my own little secret. Shiro chuckled. Freya nodded her head and respected Shiro's choice. Let's go now. A 5-hour trip is quite long and we shouldn't delay it anymore, Freya said whilst patting the manta ray's head. It glowed with an azure light and enlarged its body to accommodate everyone on its back. So where is the branch located? Shiro asked whilst hopping onto the manta ray. The branch is located in the city of Varisha, also known as the Mountain City. Mountain City? Shiro raised an eyebrow. Yeah, that's because the city is situated at the peak of several interconnecting mountains. We like to categorize the mountains into 3 sections. The main mountain, 5 large mountains, and the shorter mountains. Our faction is situated at one of the 5 large mountains due to our prestige. However, I'll give you a warning now, and that's to not offend the city lord. He is literally a one-man army that can force back a large wave of high-level intruders all by himself. Naturally, he lives on the main mountain. Plus, you cannot miss his residence. Freya replied. So the city is literally on top of a mountain range? Shiro asked. That is correct. Freya nodded and glanced backwards. Making sure that everyone was on the manta ray, she patted its head and commanded it to fly. Yuwa! Madison cried out as she grabbed onto the armor for dear life. Relax, Maddie. The mount uses mana to secure everyone so that you won't fall. Shiro chuckled. Why didn't you tell me at the start? Madison asked as she took a deep breath. Well, I didn't think you'd react like that. Shiro shrugged. Well, anyways, Freya, what role do you have in the faction? She asked, turning to Freya. My role is pretty similar to yours. I'm also an elder, but naturally, my responsibilities are more binding in terms of relations to the faction. Ah, kind of like an office worker? Shiro asked. Pretty much. I'll also take this time to explain the ranks we have. Freya said as she realized that this was a prime opportunity. The lowest rank is that of a recruit. They're given a trial period of sorts to demonstrate their prowess. After recruit is normal member, elite member, core member, treasured member, prestige member, protector, elite protector, guest elders, the council, and finally the faction leader. The prestige members are also known as the successors, since a protector would teach and train the prestige members to be the next generation of protectors. Freya explained. Can you skip ranks? Something along the lines of becoming a protector without being a prestige member. Shiro asked curiously. Well, it's possible, but you have to prove yourself in multiple ways before you can be recognized as a protector. Oh, by the way, did you know that we had to add a new rank just for you? Guest elders were never a thing in our faction, huh? Freya laughed lightly. The new recruits were surprised to hear that the faction had added a new rank just for the girl in front of them. Their gazes held the burning question of why she was given this kind of treatment. If you guys and girls are wondering, it was because she was able to eliminate a level 50 when she was more than 10 levels under them. Freya said, seeing their questioning gazes. She had the same question asked repeatedly, so she wasn't a stranger to the stares. 10 levels under them? They cried out in shock. It was just a simulation. Don't think about it too much. Shiro chuckled. If it wasn't a simulation, I would be able to eliminate more because my stamina won't be limited. Ah, another piece of information about your new guest elder. She's the owner of a pretty interesting title in New York. Freya grinned, wanting to mess around with Shiro. What title? They asked in excitement. For someone to be able to take down level 50s with a difference of 10 levels was bound to have an awe-inspiring title, right? Wrong. Her title is the infamous anaesthetic destroying princess. Freya grinned. The recruits paused for a second, not believing what they had just heard. Pardon me, but can you repeat that? One of them asked. You didn't hear wrong. Her title was the anaesthetic destroying princess. Freya chuckled. Shiro only smiled and nodded her head as if she was proud of that title. Why aren't you denying it? They retorted collectively in their minds. However, Lyrica, Madison, and Sylvia didn't make a single reaction since they had gotten used to Shiro's shenanigans long ago. I think you can still find videos of my matches online. Who knows? She shrugged nonchalantly. The recruits looked at each other and pulled out their phones one after another. After watching the matches, blood drained out of their faces as they sat a little further away from Shiro. Ironically, they had received several adverts on the page that suggested them to buy an ass plate for emergencies. They dismissed it as a joke at first, but only now did they realize that the adverts were being serious. There was even a quote on the advert. I couldn't sleep with a peace of mind until I bought the #coup ass plate. Now I can rest easy knowing that my rear is well protected. Wait, but wasn't the princess only 13 years old? And it wasn't too long ago either. Surely that can't be you, right? One of them asked. Look at the name and class. Shiro replied without looking back. But you're level 48. And who said I can't level up quickly in Kairosa? She countered. The recruit wanted to say no, but he knew it was possible. For someone to level up that fast, they would need to risk their lives every day to jump into dungeons with their party. To make matters worse, they would need to challenge higher-level dungeons to get enough EXP. One of the few solutions would be to challenge everything solo, but she's not crazy enough to do that, right? Never mind. She is crazy enough to do that. They corrected themselves after looking at Shiro once more. They continued to talk for a little while as Shiro, Lyrica, Madison, and Sylvia listened patiently. Before I forget, I should explain what you girls are doing, shouldn't I? Freya said as this didn't apply to the recruits. She had already explained what they were doing, so she could ignore them for a little bit while explaining what the three girls were going to do. Your situation is a little different, so listen carefully. While you do gain a certain amount of resources to help train yourselves every week, it'll be less than normal. To increase the amount of resources that you can get per week, you'll need to complete the faction quests that are posted on our website. There are several types of quests that we put up, but here are the more common types. Attack/hunt, guard, rescue, and harvesting herbs. All of these quests are self-explanatory, so I believe that I don't need to tell you what they mean, I presume. Freya said with a smile. The trio shook their heads since they had already done their research a long time ago in preparation for coming to the faction. Good. Other than that, I think all that's left is to show you around and arrange some rooms for you, Freya said before turning to Shiro. As for you, since you're a guest elder, your quest would be harder than others. Is that okay? Freya asked. Couldn't be better. Easy missions would be boring after all. Shiro chuckled since she intended to do the hard missions for better rewards anyways. You know, lots of people would love to have your spot and have easy missions. That way, they'll be safer. Freya said, raising an eyebrow. Well, I suppose you can say that I enjoy doing difficult tasks. Gets the blood pumping. Shiro shrugged. Understandable. Freya understood where Shiro was coming from since she too enjoyed the feeling of happiness that comes naturally after finishing a hard quest. They continued to chat for a little while as the scenery flew past them. Going higher and higher into the sky, the trio and the new recruits started to exhibit signs of fatigue while Shiro was still joking around with a smile. She's fine with the high altitude? Interesting. Freya thought with a smile. Due to the location of Verica, the strain that it puts on the adventurers is much higher. This type of area would help the recruits understand how to conserve their stamina with better efficiency. Not only that, but due to the fact that there is a severe decrease in oxygen, they would have to be more conservative with their movements. There were more factors that would hinder adventurers, but overall, this was the perfect location for newbies to be trained into skilled personnel. However, all of this was child's play for Shiro. As a person who had mastered the use of her body in her previous life, this altitude posed no problem for her. Hell, it was no different from normal since she would make sure that she was always in her peak condition. Hey Shiro, aren't you finding it a little stifling to breath? Lyrica asked as sweat started to form on her face. Me? Nah, I'm fine. I've gotten used to the thin air before, so it's not a problem for me. Shiro replied. Got any tips? Madison asked. The other recruits nodded their head as well since they were curious as to how Shiro was completely fine. Well, the only advice I can give to you is to try and take full deep breaths, if that makes sense. Not the kind that is almost like you're holding your breath, but rather deep breath in and deep breath out. Arg. It's hard to explain. I just learnt with experience. Shiro replied while scratching her head. No, that's pretty much it. You need to become more proficient with your body in order to make decent progress here in Varisha, Freya said whilst standing up. Now then, I formally welcome you to the city of Varisha. She smiled and gestured in front of them. A mass of clouds separated to reveal several mountain peaks above an ocean of clouds. Each mountain peak was filled with houses and large buildings. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro could already locate where the Adventurers Guild, auction house, and blacksmith were located. Not to mention, there was a structure that looked somewhat close to a coliseum. We'll be arriving shortly at the branch guild, and it is where we shall part ways. Shiro, you'll follow me to the main hall. No problem. Shiro nodded her head. Arriving at one of the mountain peaks, Shiro looked at the main building in interest. It was something similar to a giant palace with multiple towers that had banners hanging off the sides, showing what the tower contained. Blacksmiths had a hammer and anvil on their banner. Mages had a staff. Warriors had swords, and so on. In the middle, a giant tower was connected to the other building with bridges between them for easy access. Naturally, the biggest tower would have the biggest banner, showing off the faction emblem. Framed with an icy border, the emblem contained the image of a woman who had two pairs of wings made from ice, spreading out from behind her. The manta ray flapped its fins and landed on one of the platforms. Several people wearing white and blue uniforms walked over to them with a smile. For those who have melee-type classes, follow me and I shall take you elsewhere to split you into your respective groups. A man smiled slightly. Good luck. Shiro smiled, giving Lyrica and Madison a thumbs up. You too. The duo replied. Watching the man leave with a group of people, a woman stepped forward. For those who have a magic-based class, follow me. Of course, it doesn't matter if you're support or not. The woman said with a small smile. Good luck to you too. Shiro turned and patted Sylvia on the shoulder. Thank you. After they left, only Shiro, Freya, and 2 others remained in the area. I presume you must be the new guest elder. I was never told that you were quite the charming woman. The man said with a small bow. Thank you. Shiro smiled slightly to show that she accepted his praise. Talius, LVL 92 Winter's Apostle. Winter's Apostle? Never heard of such a class. Shiro thought, seeing his class. I'm Natash, this dipsh T's twin sister. The woman replied. Natash, LVL 90 Arctic Saintus? Both of them looked rather similar to one another. Natash was only slightly taller than Shiro, while Talius was a head and a half taller than her. Natash, did you forget what I said? Freya smiled wearily. I haven't. Natash rolled her eyes. As you both know, this is Shiro. While her level is still 48 and far from what an elder should be, her capabilities are definitely top-notch. Freya smiled. While I do trust your decision and welcome her in with open hands, the disciples aren't so nice. They're suspicious about this elder. Talius frowned. I've been hearing quite a few complaints as well. Some of them even said that if she wasn't at least C-class, we should reject her. Natash followed up, feeling rather annoyed by the disciples' reactions. However, it wasn't as if it wasn't uncalled for. They can't just promote someone without a proper reason. We need a demonstration to let them see her power. Freya suggested. There's going to be a recruit demonstration in a week or so, isn't there? We can use that chance to show off her skills to prove that she's worth the role. Natash clapped her hands together. That's right. The recruitment demonstration will have all the new recruits show off their prowess to the already existing members to prove their worth. It also allows them to decide on whether or not they want to recruit them into their party for any future missions. Talius nodded his head. That should give me enough time to reach level 50 and potentially class up depending on what happens. Shiro thought to herself. We'll do that then. Shiro will also compete in the recruitment demonstration to prove herself. Freya nodded. Since that's settled, I'll show you to your room. Natash smiled and grabbed Shiro by the hand. Looking down in surprise, she didn't expect Shiro's hand to be so cold. Shiro, why is your hand so cold? She asked. While ice-type mages do possess a cold body, that's only in combat. Their body temperature is pretty much normal outside of it. Just a passive skill of mine. It makes my body cold all the time. Shiro smiled lightly. I see. I suppose a skill like that will boost your power with ice magic, am I right? Pretty much. Shiro nodded. Bringing her through the main tower, Natash introduced her to their facilities. The tower is split into 3 main sections: commerce floors, activity floors, and research floors. The commerce floor is a gathering hub where the different blacksmiths and alchemists can meet to sell their items. The activity floors are where they would find jobs that they could do. These jobs include hunting, escorting, and the such. Not only that, the activity floors contain a few sparring rooms along with simulation pods for those who don't want to spar in real life. As for the final room, it was the one which Shiro had the most interest in. In the research room, it is divided into 3 main sections and 3 subsections. The 3 main sections are the mage's research, warrior's research, and crafts research. The subsections are libraries where members can post parts of their research as exchange for materials that they may need. So can I visit here at any time? Shiro asked curiously. No, you have your own research room in your accommodation, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you wish to see what other people have done, then feel free to drop by here. Natash smiled. Walking up a set of spiral staircases, they arrived at the very top of the tower. There was a total of 5 doors, and the center one was much bigger than the other 4. Decorated with rare materials and rune formations, Shiro could already tell that it was protecting something precious. The 4 smaller rooms are rooms for us elders. As for the one in the center, that's something you're not allowed to know just yet, I'm sorry. Natash said with an apologetic smile. No worries. I am getting the privileges close to an elder while not being tied to the faction after all. Shiro shook her head in understanding. Bringing Shiro to one of the doors, Natash pulled out a golden key card and scanned the electronic pad beside the door. This is the Elder's key card. It allows access to everything in this branch apart from a few areas that are off limits. This is also a proof of your identity. Stepping inside the room, Shiro could see a queen-sized bed, a large desk, and a doorway leading to what seems to be the research room. But what attracted her attention more was the sheer amount of mana floating around in the room. Seems like you've noticed, Natash said with a smile. It would be ridiculous not to. Shiro replied with a shrug. The room is reinforced by several defense formations along with mana gathering formations. This will help you when you're trying to make more spells or improve your current spells. You can customize this however you want. As for the recruit demonstration in a week or so's time, we'll remind you a day or 2 before, so don't worry about it. Here's a map of Varisha, and if you want, I can take you around the city. Natash offered. If that's not too much trouble, I'll take your offer. Shiro smiled whilst glancing at the map that she gave her. The map was quite detailed in the fact that it showed which factions had which mountain peak along with their general description. It also contained their general use of magic and skills. Oh, excellent. Of course, it was nothing in detail due to the fact that the factions had their own secrets. It's not troublesome at all. We'll be taking one of the mounts so that it's easier to get around the mountains. Natash chuckled before leading Shiro to the stables. They could see faction members walking around, and they would greet her one by one. Of course, they were curious about the beauty next to their elder, especially the boys. She's the new guest elder. Don't be rude, Natash said with an air of authority. Shiro only raised an eyebrow to this as she was very relaxed when they were alone. She's the new guest elder? They asked with uncertainty. Scrutinizing her with their stares, the faction members slowly surrounded the duo. Natash furrowed her brows in annoyance. Enough. Do you not have anything else you need to be doing? If so, why don't we go for a few rounds and let me educate you? She shouted out as the faction members flinched in fear and quickly scuttled away. After she was sure that they went away, Natash sighed and looked at Shiro apologetically. Sorry about that. Don't worry about it. Though I have to say, seeing your personality change all of a sudden was quite the eye-opener. Shiro replied with a smile. Well, with how things are, you need to be dominating for them to actually behave. You know the saying of give them an inch and they take a mile? Pretty much that. Natash shrugged. That is very true. Shiro nodded. Asterisk chirp. Popping her head out from behind Shiro's neck, Een pointed at her mouth. When did you bring a pet? Natash asked. I've always had her on me. She's just too lazy to greet anyone. Shiro chuckled and handed Een a C-ranked mana stone. Wait, she's only level 49. If you feed her a C-ranked mana stone, won't the energy harm her? Natash warning quickly. She could feel the mana radiating from the stone and knew it was a C-ranked mana stone. About that, Yin's somewhat special. She can eat C-ranked stones. Shiro replied with a smile, but deep down she was frowning. Seems like I can't be eating in front of them. They might notice the lollipops are actually mana stones. She thought to herself. Eating the mana stone, Yin's level increased to level 50, shocking Natash in the process. It worked? She exclaimed in confusion. A purple glow encased Yin's body and slowly solidified into an egg, similar to the condition of which Shiro first received Een. She's classing up already? Shiro thought with shock. She didn't expect Een to be able to fulfill her class-up options so quickly, which resulted in her becoming an egg once more. It seems like I must offer you a congratulations. Natash smiled. Thank you, Shiro said as she pulled out a bag and placed Een carefully into the bag. Arriving at one of the stations, Natash took the manta ray mount and gestured for Shiro to hop on. Controlling the manta ray to survey the city of Varisha, Nadash explained what each mountain peak contained in brief detail. She couldn't possibly remember everything on the spot now, could she? Would you like to go anywhere before we return to the faction? She asked. Can we visit the auction house? I want to see what kind of items they have. Of course. Making a U-turn with the manta ray, Nadash parked the mount at a private location that is given to the faction. Before we go, do you have a face mask or something similar? As a woman, I can say that there would definitely be men who would keep an eye on you if they knew you were this pretty, Nadash warned. Since Shiro was in the same faction, she was naturally going to help her out. I do, but it's only a lower face mask, Shiro replied, pulling up her black face mask. How about I give you something extra? Nadash smiled. However, Shiro narrowed her eyes at that smile since it reminded her of Aram. Nadash pulled out a pair of glasses along with several accessories. Now hold still. Nadash grinned. Sure, I guess. Shiro replied since she realized why Nadash reminded her of Aram. She also likes to dress people up, huh? After adjusting Shiro's appearance, Nadash couldn't help but give her a thumbs up and pulled out a camera. Do you mind if I took a picture? She asked. Go ahead. Shiro nodded since she could just think of it as repayment for showing her around the city. Asterisk snap snap snap. The sound of the camera shuttle could be heard as Nadash made sure to take as many pictures in different angles as she could. Obviously all safe for work. Her current appearance was mysterious in a different way. Round glasses that seemed to be quite popular for girls in East Asia and a face mask that obscured her true beauty. Of course, it only made one want to remove the mask to see what was hidden away. As for her dress, Nadash had decorated it with attachable frills and skirts that completely remade her dress into a hybrid that gave the feeling of a mage's robe. Of course, the colors were mainly black to match her current color scheme. As for her other accessories, it was just a bag that contained Een, who was in egg form, and a spell book. Perfect. Nadash smiled with satisfaction. If you can, try to act out of the norm for you so that they don't know who you are. What kind of persona would you suggest? Playful? Kill-hungry? Shy? Shiro asked. Shy. Nadash widened her eyes in excitement. Nodding her head, Shiro transformed her entire aura in an instant. It was now meek and blended with the surroundings, making her very hard to notice. Oh wow, and here I thought I was good at disguise. Nadash clapped her hands with praise. Thanks. Shiro smiled embarrassingly under her mask whilst fidgeting her body slightly as if she was truly a shy girl. Oh, magnifique. Natasha's eyes glistened. Oh my god, that just made me want to hurl. Shiro suddenly said with a face of disgust. Being meek wasn't for her, and even trying to act that way made her want to stab someone. *CK it. Emma, just go with the silent type. She shook her head and corrected her aura one more. Note to self, never try the meek type again. Shame. Oh well, the silent type also works. Here's a shade stone. It will hide your name and level from people. One-time use item and will only last for 3 hours. Nadash sighed and handed her the item. Shade stone? Shiro raised an eyebrow since she didn't even know this item existed. Shade stone blue. A stone that will hide your information under a veil of shadows. The effects last for 3 hours and can only be used once. Shiro only nodded her head whilst following behind her. Entering the auction house, there were people who were naturally curious about who Shiro was, but her uninterested blank stare caused them to recoil in fear for a moment. When they made eye contact, the first thought they had was that she was a doll. No emotions. To make matters worse, her void black eyes made it even harder to discern her emotions. Checking the terminals to see what was on sale, Shiro saw that the range of items they sold in the auction house was many times more than New York and Kairosa. It wasn't surprising considering the fact that this city was something similar to a gathering hub for factions. High-level items were constantly appearing and disappearing, with purple being the most commonly bought items. Anything under the purple grade would be forgotten should they not have any interesting skills that warrant attention. Have orange grade items ever been sold here? Shiro asked curiously. There has, but Natash smiled awkwardly with a scratch of her cheek. The problem with selling orange-grade equipment is that everyone was going for it, and it was a giant catastrophe. The city lord was absolutely pissed, hence why he now collects them all and hosts an event every year where people would compete. There is still 5 months left before the event starts, so you have plenty of time to train for it. Heh, maybe I might even get an item myself? Shiro joked. Well, depending on what happens, you might actually have a chance. But I don't know what the event activity will be this time, so we'll have to wait. Natash shrugged slightly. I see. Well, that's something else to look forward to then. Shiro nodded and continued to browse through the catalog. Looking at the prices of the items, she could help but sigh at how little her current balance is in comparison. She was just about to stop browsing when she saw a notification for rapid discount. Say, what's this rapid discount? Shiro asked. Rapid discount? It's when a bunch of expensive items are put on sale. It comes at random times, so we must make the most out of it while we can. Natash grinned eagerly and started to warm up her hands. Looking at her eagerness, Shiro couldn't help but picture the image of a tiger that's about to pounce on sleeping prey. While Natash was furiously tapping away at the terminal to buy all the items, Shiro only casually browsed through them to see if she could buy anything. Daggers, spell tomes, research papers, disguise orbs, talismans. She thought while scrolling past the rapid discount page. You're not going to buy anything? Natash asked whilst keeping her eyes on the terminal. Nah, I'm good. Not much I can buy. Shiro shrugged since she's already got everything she needed on her. Well, just keep an eye out in case you find something worthwhile. This is a rare moment, and you should buy stuff even if you don't need it. Natash suggested. Nodding her head, Shiro didn't reject the notion since it was correct. However, in a high-level city like this, her current balance of 800 million can only do so much. The money is getting quite out of hand. I should probably start converting them down to Aaron, she thought to herself. Aaron was the currency that Nantion had informed her about. But even then, she would need to get $1 billion before she could even convert it into a single bronze Aaron. And yet, her debt of the rebirth pill totaled up to 5 large silver Aarons, 50 trillion in other words. As the rapid discount slowly reached the end, Shiro had a bored face on since she didn't need any of the items. Even the weapons that had skills didn't intrigue her at all, since she had recycled low-level weapons with percentage increase base skills. This allowed her to create weapons with those skills at any time. Not to mention, it was common knowledge that percentage-based skills are more important than numerical bonuses. The hell? Why would they sell this? Shiro cried out in shock as the item completely took her off guard. Executioner's Requiem, Purple Augment, Illusion Augment. While there were no more details surrounding the item, Shiro understood the horrendous potential it contained. The Executioner's Requiem is an illusion augment that synergizes massively with sound-based illusion skills. It will confuse the opponent whilst also increasing the user's overall stats to make it easier for them to kill the victim. However, while the power is great, the backlash is just as severe. It would cause hallucinations to the user which would slowly hypnotize them and turn them into a bloodthirsty battle maniac. When used by a high-level adventurer, this item could cause mass destruction since the user would not care about the damage inflicted onto themselves. The only thing on their mind would be to kill everything. The Executioner's Requiem was currently a purple item, but would slowly evolve into a red-grade item. Everyone in her old world knew about the Executioner's Requiem after the tragedy that befell a large city. Due to the nature of the item, hardly anyone could resist against the illusions and were completely subjected to its power. It was only after the hero's party was dispatched did the menace finally die, and the item was subsequently destroyed. Arnavs. Naturally, she was a part of that party and knew how much of a pain it was to fight against it. From that point on, a new classification of items was created for equipment with similar effects to the Executioner's Requiem. They were known by the classification of corrupted relics. What's wrong? You want an item? Natash asked, shocked by her sudden outburst. Well, half and half. Shiro frowned. This item, are you able to buy it for me and I'll owe you the money? Shiro asked. The item costs 5 billion right now, and she wasn't about to let it fall into someone's hands. especially since this was a high-level city and her party were training here. Sure, don't worry about the money since it's part of the budget given by the main guild. Natash smiled and pressed by. However, she was a little late and the item was taken by someone else. Shiro frowned and flexed her fingers. A string of nanobots entered the terminal and wanted to edit the information. But before she could make any corrected, red strings suddenly appeared in the terminal and started to survey the area. *T. Quickly retracting her bots, Shiro avoided the detection of a high-level hacker that was protecting the system information. While she was sure that she could defeat him, she knew that she would be discovered quickly should that happen, and that was not what she wanted. I wasn't able to get it in time. Sorry, I should have given you a spare account to buy stuff. Natash apologized. No worries. Shiro waved her hand. The only thing she could do now was to keep an eye out and see if she could kill the user before the backlash took over the buyer. TSK, annoying. She thought. With the danger of the executioner's requiem causing mass damage in the city, Shiro had to make sure to keep an eye out for the safety of the party. However, now that Shiro knew items like the executioner's requiem could be sold, she grabbed the spare account that Natash gave her and made sure to keep an eye out for other items. Fortunately, there wasn't any more items like the executioner's requiem. That makes my job easier, I suppose. Shiro thought to herself. If all she had to do was to keep an eye out for a single item, she could spare the time to do other things such as missions or developing new skills. After the rapid discount finished, Natash had a satisfied smile on her face and collected all of her items. Shiro tried to see if she could find the buyer for the executioner's requiem but could only sigh. Trying to find one person in a sea of people that are all redeeming items was a little hard even for her. It should be fine. The effects of executioner's requiem is obvious and I should be able to find them. She thought with a sigh. It's only the first day and I see a pain in the ass item like this. TSK, what a pain. Returning to the main tower, Shiro and Natash said goodbye to each other and returned to their rooms. Locking the door, Shiro grinned since she had something she wanted to try out. Since the room is flooded with mana, and this princess is a monster, it naturally means I can eat my room in the most literal way. She chuckled. Setting down in the table, Shiro looked for where mana was most abundant and sat down. Crossing her legs, she started to drink the mana out of the air. Feeling her hunger diminishing slightly, Shiro smiled seeing this work. Though I'm not sure how much EXP this would award me. Stopping her actions, Shiro had another idea and pressed her palms on the ground. Since this was her own training room, they wouldn't bother her. Metal and lightning sparked rampantly around the room as it converged into a turbine of sorts. Naturally, it was a miniature one. Connected to the turbine was a compartment that looked like a 3D printer. Mana condenser. A device that will absorb the ambient mana in the atmosphere and condense it into a crystal. While some may think that mana crystals and mana stones were the same, they are completely wrong. That is due to the fact that the mana stone loses a lot of its mana due to the mana being distributed throughout the monster's body. As for the mana crystal, it is a pure, untouched piece of condensed mana. Its effectiveness is definitely much better than a mana stone. The only downside is the fact that it requires a lot of mana, along with the fact that it takes a while to form. There had been several mana crystal farms in her old world, but it took too much space due to how much mana was drained from the atmosphere. If you had 2 mana condensers in close proximity, it would be useless since it would just be wasting the mana to make 2 half-assed crystals. Plus, the mana was too sparse in other cities for the condenser to take effect. If she had used it before, it would have taken weeks to months for a crystal to be formed. By the time I wake up, I should have a full mana crystal for breakfast. Maybe more depending on how much mana is in the air, but since they have a formation, it should be more than enough. Shiro mused to herself. She was about to change into some clothes that were more suitable for sleep, but stopped to look at her current appearance. Due to the glasses and the face mask, it was hard to see what she actually looked like, but in another way, it was also attractive. This look is quite all right. I might keep this for a while. She thought to herself as she stored the outfit away and put on a nightgown. Laying in bed, Shiro yawned lightly before glancing over at Een, who was an egg. Good night, little Een. Shiro smiled softly and fell asleep. Waking up the next day, Shiro wore the same outfit as the previous day and checked out the condenser. Within the chamber, she could see a neon blue and pink crystal that was in the form of a droplet. There was another droplet that was being formed, but the size was much smaller. Opening the chamber to remove the crystal, Shiro made sure to lock it back up so that there wouldn't be any gaps in the chamber. Looking at the crystal droplet, she examined it just to be sure. Mana crystal. A pure condensed source of mana that is more potent than a mana stone. Current potency, medium C rank. Perfect, she muttered with a smile. However, she wasn't going to eat it just yet since there was no way she could absorb the mana. She couldn't even eat a C-ranked mana stone, never mind a C-ranked mana crystal that was even more potent than a mana stone. Storing the mana stone in her inventory, Shiro grabbed her bag and placed it inside carefully. Adjusting the glasses on her face, Shiro made her way to the bounty hall. Shrinking her aura so that not many would notice her, Shiro walked over to the missions that are suited for level 50s or above. Her current identity was disguised as Sophie, a level 48 ice mage. As for the faction members that did notice her, they were deeply intrigued by who she was since her aura made her feel like a mysterious scholar. Not only that, her appearance caused them to wonder deeply about what she looked like. Some tried to reach out and talk to her, but were dissuaded by her uninterested glance. It was as if they were nothing in her eyes. However, there were still members who only became increasingly curious. Of course, Shiro only ignored them and stood in front of the bounty board that hosted level 50 bounties. There are a bunch of missions to do with farming for materials that drop from a level 50 dungeon. I might take one of them for now since I need to level up to quickly, Shiro thought. Looking at the missions, she singled them out to 3 options that best suited her current situation. Collect 50 ivory jade lilacs. Destination: Jade Caverns, level 50 dungeon. Recommended for 5-member parties. Collect 25 glacial lotus. Destination: Ice Spirit Hollows, level 50 dungeon. Recommended for 10-member parties. Collect 10 Ice King's crown. Destination: Ice King Ephium's domain, level 50 dungeon. Recommended for 10-member parties. The first and second missions are mostly collection missions that require you to defend against the monsters while you harvest. The last one is just a pure farming missions that wants you to kill the Ice King over and over again. She thought whilst reading the mission description in more detail. Naturally, Shiro would pick the one that only needed her to kill the Ice King repeatedly. In her opinion, it was better than just sitting around looking for rare materials for hours on end. As for the mission rewards, it was more resources under her name that would go to Lyrica and the others. Of course, that was just the agreement between her and their faction leader. For the mission reward itself, it was blacksmith commission tokens that will have the faction blacksmiths make a single item for you. The quality increases depending on how many tokens you have. Plus, she would also get a discount since the poster of the bounty was a blacksmith himself. Taking the bounty chip, she pulled out her phone and registered it under her own faction account that Nathash had given her during the trip through the city. After registering the bounty, Shiro adjusted her glasses and left the bounty hall. However, a group of 3 blocked her way, which attracted the attention of the surrounding members. "If it isn't too much trouble, can we borrow a little bit of your time?" one of them asked. He had short blonde hair and blue eyes, a rather handsome face and a charming smile. Feeling a few jealous stares from the crowd, Shiro couldn't help but roll her eyes. "Does this miss look like I wanted to talk with this twat?" she thought. Using Phantom Path, Shiro flicked past them with ease. Her hair fluttered behind her as it left them in shock. Even some of the C-class members couldn't pick up her movements. "Sorry, I'm busy," Shiro said, glancing back at them before walking off. The dungeon, King Ephium's domain, was located deep in a cave system on the side of the smaller mountain peaks. While the level was considered pretty low for the city, due to the fact that most of the people are already over the level 50 barrier, it was still quite busy due to the abundance of items and materials that you can get from the dungeon itself. This dungeon was also known as the holy ground for blacksmiths under level 50, due to the fact that the materials dropped are the peak of D-class. Walking to the docking bay for the mounts, Shiro registered herself for a manta ray mount and hopped on its back. She had rented it to last her for the whole day, so that she could take some more time in the dungeon if she wanted. Plus, she needed to get 10 Ice King crowns so that she would definitely need the full day, especially since the dungeon was going to be slightly longer. From the description of the dungeon, it seems like there's the chance to get a quest from the system. Shiro thought to herself. The quest was completely random, so there was no way to guarantee the quest activating except for hoping the system would be nice. However, the reward for the quest was a choice between two items: the emergency bag or the wish bag. The emergency bag would give you something that would help you at that moment in time, while the wish bag would give you something that you would want. Of course, the bag content was randomized. For all they knew, it could give you some food if you were hungry. While the reward is amazing, one can only attempt this quest once, so they had to choose wisely. If I finish the quest, I should probably get the wish bag. It might even give me a rebirth pill. Shiro thought wishfully. Shaking her head, she dismissed the thought and controlled the manta ray to fly towards the mountain. While on her way to the mountain, she saw several other mounts flying around to different peaks. She could tell that they belonged to other factions due to the fact that their uniforms were completely different. That being said, my black outfit isn't exactly the same as the Winter's Grace outfit now, is it? She mused to herself. While she did know that elders had the freedom of wearing whatever they wanted, they would still choose to wear a color scheme that matches the faction. They didn't want to be associated with a different faction after all. However, due to the nature of her contract, she was allowed this freedom. As she was closing in on her destination, Shiro stood up on the manta ray and pulled out a whistle that she had received after renting the manta ray. The whistle had two buttons. One was to send it back to the faction, and the other was to call it to your location. Since she was heading into the dungeon, the manta ray didn't need to be around. Stopping the manta ray above the city, Shiro jumped off and blew her whistle. Making sure that the mount was making its way back to the faction, she looked down and flipped her body so that she was falling head first. Her actions caused the people on their mounts to widen their eyes in shock. They didn't expect a crazy girl to jump off her mount and fall head first. It was pure suicidal, or so they thought. Acting her phantom path and float passive, Shiro landed on the ground gently like a snowflake, meeting the palm of one's hand. Dusting her outfit, Shiro pulled up a map to see where she needed to go in order to arrive at the dungeon. Ignoring the shocked gazes of the people around her, Shiro started to walk towards the east of the city. Seems like this mountain peak is contested by two small factions, she thought, seeing two types of uniforms that were present in the streets. One is a white and red while the other is green and blue. There were some small conflicts that she would see while walking past a few stores, but it never escalated in severity. It was as if they were somewhat afraid of breaking the peace by escalating the fight. Aura in Epsilon. Could the city lord really be that strong? She muttered in interest. For a single person to have this kind of effect with just his presence, it really made Shiro curious about his power. While she was also able to achieve the same effect in her past life, that was considering the fact that no one could defeat her, except for the hero. Adding on the fact that she was able to wipe a city off the face of the planet, literally, everyone behaved themselves as long as she told them to. While she was thinking about how strong the city lord was, she did some research on the internet and found out that his class was called Armageddon Sentinel, a class specialized for pure destruction. While there was some information about his skill set and what they did, it was never in detail since the city lord had refused to explain his skills. You don't want the enemy to study you after all. Hence, all the people could do was to guess his abilities based on what they saw him do in old recordings of his fights. While the recordings didn't show everything in detail, Shiro could already tell the lethality of his class with just a single look. If I needed to fight against him, the best ways would be either redirecting his power against him or just straight up deal more damage. His class seemed to give him certain resistances to crowd control along with increased defense. The best way would be naturally using a sniper from long ranges to constantly bombard him, she thought. Her current MP was 831k. She estimated that once she reached 1 million MP, she should be able to unlock her sniper creation. At that point, she wouldn't even need to go close range to kill her enemies. She could just use her swords to launch herself high into the air and snipe them from afar. Of course, She wouldn't actively choose this since just sitting around and sniping felt boring for her. She would only use this if there were no other options. Arriving at the cave, Shiro saw people walking in and out constantly. "Seems like I'm at the right place," she muttered before walking in. As she walked through the cave, she realized that she was going deeper into the mountain. The temperature was dropping rapidly as ice could be seen on the cave walls. Naturally, this didn't bother Shiro since she was a snow girl. Pressing her palms on the ice, Shiro smiled as she could sense the entire cave system beneath her. Interesting. This cave leads to a giant cavity in the mountain where the dungeon portal is. If a large monster breaks out, it could potentially break open the mountain and lead to the collapse of the city above it. Following the path down, she arrived at cavity and couldn't help but crane her head back at the sheer size of the dungeon door. "Well, damn," she muttered. Before anyone could even talk to her, Shiro walked towards the dungeon door and entered the dungeon alone. Adjusting her eyes after teleporting, Shiro found herself at the entrance of the city covered in snow and ice. There were several guards standing on top of the battlements to keep an eye out for intruders. No quest. Unlucky. She sighed, seeing no change in the system. Looking up at the guards, Shiro adjusted her glasses before a horrifying burst of mana encompassed the entire battlement. Ice spears started to form in the air and shot towards the guards, stabbing them through the head instantly. Their bodies froze over and crumbled into dust. "Seems kinda weak for guards," Shiro muttered whilst glancing at the now empty battlement. Shaking her head, she walked through the gates and casually snapped her fingers. Frozen Hell, Azure Hellfire. Neon blue orbs of fire flared around her and shot into the shadows of the gate. Arg! Without even glancing back, Shiro could tell that all the assassins that were in the shadow were killed. Trying to kill this princess while exposing your killing intent like that. Shame. She scoffed. Once she was past the gate, she saw a beautiful city that was covered with a thin layer of snow. However, it was eerily quiet with not a single sign of pedestrians. Ominous. Shiro chuckled slightly. Taking a deep breath, Shiro raised her hand and gathered mana in her palms. A magic circle was slowly being created above her. As the second layer of the magic circle was done, more and more mana started to gather in the circle as Shiro furrowed her brows. Clenching her hand into a fist, a giant snowstorm started to rage through the kingdom. Sending out her senses to pick up any life signs within the storm, Shiro found quite a few groups of soldiers and hidden assassins. Grinning slightly, she tapped her necklace and summoned her swords. Her body flickered away from her spot as the snowstorm slowly died down. One of the assassins were confused about the sudden appearance of the snowstorm and started to make his way towards the entrance. He wanted to see what had caused the storm. But before he could even react, a sword glided across his throat and silenced him. During his fall down, he couldn't even see the shadow of the assailant. Dashing across the rooftops, Shiro twisted her body to kill each assassin with efficient moves that wouldn't waste any stamina. Pivoting on her right leg, she dashed past another assassin while throwing 2 daggers that pierced their eyes and into their brain. She wanted to take care of all the assassins first before the soldiers, since she could easily kill the soldiers that are bunched up together. However, it wasn't the same for assassins. She would need to go around killing them individually since they were spread out. She did this to avoid a situation where the assassins would call the boss in while she was fighting. Even for her, it would be an awkward situation where she could potentially be overwhelmed. Leaping off the roof of a house, she flipped her body onto the side of a giant cathedral of sorts. Parkouring her way up to the top, she flexed her fingers and created a bow. Nanotech True Sight Bow LVL 50 Purple. Plus 1000 critical chance. Plus 1000 critical damage. Plus 1000 range. Plus 800 attack. Plus 500 armor pierce. Plus 200 ignore defense. Skills: True Sight, Light Speed, Searing Arrow. The bow itself boasted an incredible crit chance and crit damage setup and could kill in one shot. Only problem being the amount of MP needed per shot. A basic arrow needed 15k MP, while a fully charged arrow could take up to 50k worth of MP. Naturally, the damage scaled up to the amount of MP used. Knocking 5 arrows, Shiro pulled back on the bowstrings and aimed up into the sky. Narrowing her eyes, she charged up the arrows before firing them into the sky. 5 streaks of neon blue lights could be seen drawing a line in the sky before piercing the head of 5 different assassins. That should be all of the assassins, Shiro muttered in satisfaction. With all the assassins dead, all she needed to do was kill all the soldiers, and the first boss should arrive. However, due to the layout of the city, everything was in her favor, especially since there were more than enough cover for her to abuse the boss with her guns. Creating 2 hand cannons with suppressors on the barrel, Shiro flipped off the cathedral and landed softly on the ground. A squadron of soldiers had coincidentally turned the corner as she landed. TSI, 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 TSI. Firing the suppressed hand cannon with optimal accuracy, Shiro killed the entire squad with just headshots. Easy kills. Shiro grinned before making her way to the next squad. ####TSI. Killing the final soldier, Shiro felt a burst of mana that came from the center of the city and smiled knowing the first boss was about to arrive. Waiting for a short moment, she prepared herself as she saw an armored silhouette on a horse. He wore a heavy plated armor that was colored in silver, while the horse was extremely muscular to the point that Shiro could feel her disgust increasing every minute. Of all the things that she hated, macho was definitely high up on the list. Pulling back a supercharged arrow, she narrowed her eyes before firing it. Boom. The arrow released a golden glow and flew towards the boss. However, just as the arrow was about to collide with the horse, a mana barrier flared around the boss and shielded it from the arrow. Imperial General Umak, LVL 50 boss. HP 8000000/8000000. MP 9 750 000/10 Intruder. For the crime of *bang. Shut up and let's fight. Gritting his teeth at her provocation, the boss pulled up the reins and controlled the horse to charge towards Shiro. Shiro grinned at the challenge and dashed towards the boss with 2 swords in hand. She already had a plan but wanted to see what skills the boss has first. Style Azura's path, Azura sword path. Twisting her body, Shiro stabbed the shield of the boss over and over again. The 2 other swords that were floating around her augmented themselves with Calamity's will and ate away at his mana. Impudent. The boss, Umak, shouted out as his spear glowed with a crimson light. Stabbing towards her, the image of a dragon followed behind the spear strike. 1-hit damage skill. Shiro thought as her body flickered into the rift and dodged the strike. Appearing behind him, she spun her body clockwise and slammed her sword once more into his barrier. Watching his MP slowly chip away, Shiro narrowed her eyes and flipped backwards. Flicking her wrists, she threw her swords up and had them float around her while 2 hand cannons were created in their place. Opening the bullet cylinder, Shiro inserted 2 mana disruption bullets, 1 in each gun. Feeling danger in front of her, she bent her body backwards to the point that one couldn't believe she managed to keep her balance. Looking at the spear that passed her face narrowly, Shiro grinned and blew on the spear playfully. Umak could feel his rage increase as his opponent had the time to smile during a life-and-death fight. Pulling back his spear, he twirled it in his hands before pulling up the reins on the horse once more. *nay. Lifting up his body, the horse slammed both his hooves down on the ground. *bang. Crack. The pavement under the horse split apart instantly as the ground under the pavement was also affected. However, Shiro was able to jump away in time to avoid the stun effect that might have been carried by the stomp. A crowd control skill from the horse. I'll need to be careful in close-range combat, she thought whilst crouching slightly as she landed. Just as she was about to shoot her guns, a flaming spear appearing in her sights as she was forced to coat her hands in a layer of glacial ice. Flicking her hand cannon up to free her right hand, she grabbed the spear by the handle before twisting her body and sent it flying back to the boss. SSSS. Taking a sharp breath in, Shiro frowned at the fact that most of the ice was melted by the sheer temperature of the spear. Unfortunately, before the spear could even hit the boss, it morphed itself into a ball of flames that reassembled itself in the boss's hands. Is that all you got? Seems pretty dull for a boss. Shiro grinned. That's my question. You seem pretty basic for someone who eliminated the squads. The boss scoffed. Ho ho, so you wish to see me actually try? Shiro laughed as she coughed her hand cannon once more. Then I'll show you just what this princess can do. Narrowing her eyes with killing intent, her body flicked into the rift and appeared behind the boss in an instant. Asterisk bang. Shooting the barrier at point blank with her mana disruption bullets caused it to shut down for a moment, surprising the boss. Raising up her second gun, she was about to fire once more as Umak panicked and activated his personal mana shield. However, seeing her grin, he knew he fell into her trap. Asterisk bang. As the second mana disruption bullet fired, it shut down the second shield, leaving Umak exposed to what she wanted to do. Her sword swung toward him with several copies trailing behind it. Umak raised his spear to block, but to his surprise, he felt no contact with the first sword. Ingoe. Asterisk Pucci. Huh. Widening his eyes in surprise, the boss was shocked to see the swords slash into his body. He clearly felt no contact with the first swords, so they were definitely illusions. And yet, somehow, they were physical and lacerated his flesh easily. Asterisk boom. Activating his aura skill to push her away, Umak gritted his teeth in pain and looked at her in wariness. What's wrong, almighty Umak? Can't block a sword? Shiro chuckled whilst pointing her sword at him. What kind of trickery is this? Explain now. CK right off. As if this princess will explain my skill to you. Shiro rolled her eyes as her body flashed into the rift once more. Appearing above him, she slashed down with her sword once again. Understanding the dangers, Umak rolled off his horse and quickly orientated himself to stab her as a counter. Asterisk nay. Her sword stabbed into the horse's back as it cried out in pain. Thrashing around to get her off its back, the horse ignored the fact that it had stopped its master from counterattacking. Tisk. Clicking his tongue in annoyance, Umak decided to sacrifice the horse for damage on Shiro. It was about to become a corpse anyways. Throwing his spear up into the air, he created fire chains that attempted to wrap around Shiro. Shiro only gave the chains a dismissive glance before activating her own skill and countered the fire chains with ice chains. However, in the time she had used to destroy the chains, the spear was already engulfed in a fire storm. Die under the wrath of the fire god, Umak commanded. The spear transformed into a streak of red that stabbed towards Shiro, who flipped off the horse and slammed her palms into the ground. Frozen Hell. Ice Palace. Asterisk KRRR. Feeling a burst of mana that wasn't any weaker than his smite of the fire god, Umak widened his eyes in disbelief as he watched a giant ice palace construct itself around him. Asterisk boom. The spear collided with the palace, chipping away a few layers of the glacial ice. How? He cried out in shock. Structural integrity, boy. Even though glacial is strong, it can be stronger with the right internal structure. Shiro grinned and pointed at her head. Even without the benefits of her passives and titles, her ice magic would already be stronger than average due to the fact that she could reinforce the structural integrity with her imagery of the actual spell. A simple task for her since she could even remember all of the blueprints she's seen regarding future tech in her mind. Of course, the average adventurer would find this task nigh impossible. Boy, you know what I like to do to people I fight when given a chance? Shiro asked with a grin while she sat on her throne. Umak didn't respond as he stood on guard. Che fine. I'll let the next moment be a surprise. Shiro frowned a little as she flexed her upwards. Asterisk boom. Suddenly feeling an invader in his chrysanthemum, Umak paled in fright. However, he had a slightly more special treatment since the ice spear had a shotgun embedded inside. Waving her hand that had a silver nanotech wire twirled around her finger, Shiro grinned and tugged on the wire before Umak could even shout stop. Asterisk bang. An explosion of blood, flesh, and organs could be seen as the gunshot ripped through his innards like it was nothing. Looking at Umak, who died standing on his feet due to a certain support at the base, Shiro couldn't help but chuckle slightly at the expression he pulled just before death. Now, a normal adventurer would cringe at the sight of a man missing around 90% of his torso, but Shiro was anything but normal. Hopping lightly over to Umak, Shiro checked to see if the magic stone was in his heart. Bingo! She smiled seeing the neon blue mana stone. Pulling it out, she collected his corpse and checked her loot. Special drop? She muttered with an raised eyebrow. Umak's humiliation, LVL 50 purple. A protective ward that would defend the user from any attack that doesn't surpass C-class in strength. At the strongest point, the rear, the ward may even stand a chance against low B-class attacks. Item description. Due to the humiliation and anguish Imperial General Umak felt just before death, he crystallized his life power into an item to help protect them from a humiliating end. Passive skill. Soul Rejection. Soul Rejection. This item cannot be used by those who have violated the sacred area during combat. Especially user ID, Shiro. Uses, 1/1. Cannot be destroyed. Ho! Shiro didn't know exactly how to react to such an item. While the effects were indeed impressive since it could potentially block an attack from a B-ranked adventurer, just the fact that it singled her out from the passive skill somewhat annoyed her. I'm sure it didn't need to add my name. There should be more people who use this weak point, right? She mused to herself. Shaking her head, she stored the item in her inventory for now. Who knows, maybe her party could have some use for it. Dismissing her ice palace, Shiro started to make her way towards the main castle in the middle of the city, since that is where the Ice King Ephium lives. During her walk, she could feel several eyes staring at her in a mix of fear and disbelief. Looking towards the source, she would grin and send a single arrow flying towards them. If they could dodge, she'd allow them to live. If they couldn't, well, they die. Of course, she wasn't too lenient. If they stayed for too long enough though they survived the arrow, she would personally make sure they died. It was just a small game to keep herself occupied for a moment whilst walking towards the castle. She wanted to conserve some energy in case the fight was harder than she thought. Oddly enough, she didn't meet any other boss that was supposed to be on the way to the castle. Could they have gathered in one room together? She thought. Arriving at the castle gates, she tapped it gently and froze it over before shattering it into dust. No welcoming party? Lame, Shiro sighed as she walked towards the main hall. While she knew that all the bosses were there, due to the fact that she could sense a cluster of strong mana signs, she was also a little excited to see what she could do against several bosses. Killing one was easy, but trying to kill several was another question entirely. Their skills could synergize with each other and make it hard for her to eliminate the bosses one by one. Of course, she was prepared to get out of there if the need arises. She wasn't suicidal after all. Asterisk clack, 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 clack. Her footsteps echoed in the empty hallways as if it was a warning sign to the bosses. Asterisk creak. Opening the door to the main hall, Shiro looked up towards the 4 generals and 1 king with her own air of dominance. Stepping back in shock, the 4 generals couldn't help but gulp when they felt her aura. It was the kind that would fight back at everything, even God itself. So it seems like you want to fight me as a group? Shiro chuckled while adjusting her glasses. She had her face mask on so they couldn't see her expression. However, just from her tone, they knew she had mocking grin. But remembering the message they received about the tragic death of their companion, they knew the girl in front of them was too dangerous to fight alone, in more ways than one. Ephium looked at her from his throne and slowly stood up. While he wasn't bigger than his generals, his power and aura completely overshadowed them. I have a proposition, he called out. Ho? A final boss that's wanting to negotiate? Go on, you have my attention. Shiro chuckled and made herself a throne to sit on. Crossing her legs, she rested her chin on her palm and waited for the king to speak of his offer. Take off your mask and glasses first. Hearing his demand, Shiro frowned since he was acting as if she was someone who could be ordered around like a servant. Now tell me, why should I do that? Shiro narrowed her eyes with killing intent. Her smile had long faded away as the generals clutched their swords tightly in fear. The sheer amount of killing intent that was rolling off her sent chills down their spines. Because I wish to make you my queen. Class up option receive. Imperial Ice Queen. Additional rewards. +2 levels. Ha 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 ha. Hearing her laugh, the king frowned in confusion. Do you think this princess here is an idiot? Taking this class up would only bind me to this dungeon. Shiro said as her killing intent started to increase. Her body flickered away from her spot, shocking the generals as they pulled out their weapons. Plus, do you seriously think you are worthy to ask me to be your wife? I would say you should kneel and beg for me, but even then, you simply aren't worth the time. Her voice appeared behind the group as they swung their swords towards the source. However, they widened their eyes when they saw no one there. Asterisk bang bang bang. In a short moment, one of the generals was dead in an instant due to him taking a shotgun blast to the face at point blank. While he did have his barriers, they were useless against Shiro's mana disruption bullets. Now this is a situation where it's not me that's trapped with you, but rather, it is you who's trapped with me. Shiro grinned. After the first general died in a single burst, the other three knew they would have the same ending if they're not going in at 120% of their full power. All of them used their final trump cards instantly. One even activated his life essence skill that would quickly burn away his life force in return for overwhelming power. Feeling the explosion of mana in the area, Shiro narrowed her eyes, erasing all signs of playfulness faded from her face. Sliding backwards, she readied her swords as the generals dashed towards her. Asterisk bang bang. Quickly parrying two swords, she averted them to the side and slashed towards them with the remaining two swords that she had floating above her. However, before they could meet their target, it was blocked by a spear. Element shift. Lightning. Asterisk BZZ. Electricity sparked around the sword and lashed towards the general. Unfortunately, it was unsuccessful since he managed to erect a barrier just in time to block it. Imperial Judgment. Hearing the shout of the king, Shiro suddenly felt the threat of death from above her. Instantly looking towards the source of the feeling, she widened her eyes seeing a giant golden sword piercing towards her. Frozen Hell. Ice Drake's Feast. Stomping her foot down, a magic circle erupted under her and summoned the Ice Drake. Asterisk boom. As the two collided, the generals took advantage of the force and pushed Shiro back by a few steps. All three of their weapons erupted with a golden glow and attacked her body at 3 different points. Rift Walker. Phasing into the rift, Shiro dodged their strikes and appeared behind them. First, kill the weak one, Shiro thought to herself. Activating her pseudo-elemental armor, she created a hand cannon to break the shield first. Asterisk ping. Shattering the mana barrier that the generals activated, she lashed the spiked chain around his neck and flipped her body over him before pulling hard at her chains. Awithtilda knew. However, just as she knew how to use pseudo-elemental armor, the boss also activated his. Fire raged around him as it converged together into a flaming full-plate armor. Support me, he shouted out as he summoned 2 great swords that were encased in first. Twisting his body, he swung both swords towards her. Asterisk boom. Pulling hard on her chains, Shiro shifted her center of gravity and parried the 2 great swords into the ground beside her so that she wouldn't take any damage from the force. The 2 other generals weren't idle while this was happening. Activating their own pseudo-elemental armor, they dashed towards her with their weapons in hand. Both my hands are occupied with the boss in front of me. I doubt the Ascendant Dream can parry their strength without me backing it up, she thought, seeing the duo dash towards her. Not only that, she also needed to worry about the king that was preparing his next spell. Stepping into the rift once more, she reappeared above them with a pitch-black trident in hand. Calamity Trident. Asterisk boom. The ground broke apart from the force of the trident slamming into the ground. While the 3 generals managed to dodge the impact head-on, they were still stunned nonetheless. Lashing her chains at the 2 generals that wanted to support their teammate, She tugged on the chains and launched herself at them. In style Azura's path, phantom path, asterisk bang bang. Kicking them with as much power as she could focus at the moment, their bodies were launched towards the back of the hall. Now it's just me and you, boy. Shiro shouted out with a grin since she was given more room now. Pivoting on her ankle, she launched her body towards him like a bullet. Swing her sword at him. All four of the swords were covered with a golden glow that made several copies of the same sword. In a few short moments, the general's armor was already in tatters due to the fact that he wasn't able to block the swords at all. Asterisk dong. A bell toll rang out as a three-fold magic circle encased the entire hall. No Tier 3 magic zone. Shiro grinned as she flipped her body over the general and aimed her hand cannon at the magic circle. Asterisk bang. Ping. Destroying the outermost ring, Shiro reverted the Tier 3 magic that the king had been working on into a Tier 2. Gritting his teeth in frustration, the king decided to accept the current situation and activate the magic. The temperature around the area dropped as snow started to fall. Ice god Kiefer's fractured domain. Ho ho, you dare use ice magic in this princess's presence. And to make it worse, a domain? Man, you really are unlucky, aren't you? Shiro chuckled as the king was confused. Let me educate you. She smiled since she could see his confusion. A burst of mana exploded out from her body, pushing back the general by a few steps. Slamming her palm into the ground, a spider web of mana strands expanded out from her spot and started to corrode away at the domain. Impossible! Ephium cried out in shock. He could clearly feel the domain being ripped from his control, and there was no way he could stop it. Twisting her palm slightly, a pulse of black mana flowed through the entire formation. Black snow started to fall as it corroded everything it touched, the only exception being Shiro herself. Skill discovered. Ice Demon's Calamitous Domain. Added to the Frozen Hell series. Ignoring the notifications, Shiro flicked her fingers and created hundreds of ice spears from the snowflakes that were falling. Thankfully, all she needed to do was to change their shape as the main mana supply had already been taken from the king. If not, her mana links would crumble right around now. Letting the king deal with the spears, Shiro dashed towards the general once more. She had a small window of time to kill him before the other two generals come as support. Flexing her fingers, a giant greatsword was created in her hands. Ha! Swinging the sword at the boss, Shiro grinned when she saw his attempt to dodge. Asterisk ping. The sword broke apart to reveal what was under the ice. Widening his eyes at the pitch-black trident, the general knew that this wasn't looking good for him. Gritting his teeth, he surged mana through his entire body, hoping to reinforce it enough so that he survived the attack. Asterisk bang. Looking at the general who was still alive, albeit barely, Shiro chuckled nonetheless. You should have died with that attack, but since you're at 10% health, you've given me some stress relief, she said, pulling down her mask to reveal a stone-cold smile. Dark Seraphim. Asterisk boom. A giant cloud of black mist suddenly exploded out with Shiro in the center. Since the skill only lasted 5 seconds, she needed to make sure that she got as much fun out of it as she could. Ha! Stabbing his swords into the ground, the boss summoned a giant fire array around him as a firestorm started to grow within the dark mist. While he didn't know what the mist did, he wasn't about to risk it. Unfortunately for him, any form of mana defense was useless against Shiro. Don't use a flimsy defense. If you're going to resist, let this princess have some fun. Her voice tinged with joy was heard softly behind his ear. A chill shot down his spine as he turned around quickly in hopes of defending against her assault. However, when he made contact with her pair of eyes that were narrowed in sadistic joy, a question appeared in his mind. Who's the real monster here? Grabbing him by the head, she kneed him in the face and broke his jaw with ease. Since she only had a short moment of time to do whatever she wanted, she made sure that there were no wasted movements. Flexing her fingers, several strands of wires that were tinged with corruption wrapped around the boss's body and started to eat away at him. AR. His scream was cut short when Shiro jammed a sword straight down his throat. However, She wasn't using the Ascendant Dream, but rather a glacial ice sword, meaning she could control its shape however she wanted. He could feel the ice melt inside his body before coagulating itself into a different shape. It was something that bore a resemblance to a spiked ball that had hooks of varying lengths instead of normal spikes. Ever heard of disembowelment? Shiro grinned before standing on his shoulders and pulled back on the handle. Asterisk Poochie. Just as the mist cleared up, the king was shocked to see one of his generals dead with most of his internal organs ripped out from his mouth. Due to the amount of force she used to pull the weapon out, the blood spewed everywhere, especially onto her body. Hee, are you next? Or shall I leave you for last? You did try to make me marry you after all. Shiro turned her head towards the king and giggled slightly. That being said, I shouldn't keep your two other boy toys bored now, shall I? She continued, narrowing her eyes at the remaining two generals. For the next few minutes, it could only be described as gruesome. While it was a rather quick death, Shiro made sure that it was painful enough so that she felt satisfied. Looking at the dead body of the king, Shiro excavated the mana stone from his corpse that was anything but intact. Collect. Looking at the loot she received from him, Shiro raised an eyebrow when she saw a piece of set equipment. Imperial Ice Decree LVL 50 Greatsword, purple, part of the Imperial Ice set 1/6. Plus 1,500 attack. Plus 1,000 ignore defense. Plus 800 sharpness. Plus 15% chance of stun. Passive skill. Frozen Edge. When the sword hits anything, it has a small chance to freeze the target for a short period of time. Imperial Wrath. For every successful attack that the user makes, a single point would be added to a counter. After the counter passes a certain amount of points, the user can spend the points to increase the power of the next skill or attack. Counters can be stacked on continuously, but will reset once the user stops attacking for more than 15 seconds. Active skills. Imperial Ice Coffin. Encase the enemy in a coffin of ice that will siphon their MP away. Imperial Protection. Stab the sword into the ground to summon a formation that will protect the user with ice for a short period of time. Imperial Judgment. Summon a mighty sword that will strike down on your opponent, dealing massive damage. Increased attack if enemy is on low health. While the item is amazing, Shiro couldn't help but sigh at the restrictions. Can only be used by a user with an Imperial type class. I wonder, if I can lend this to the blacksmithing department, they should be able to study the sword's craftsmanship while giving me some contributions as well. She muttered, since this kind of sword would be a waste to recycle, especially since she didn't need the skills that the weapon came with. She already had skills from other weapons that held similar effects. Shaking her head, she looked at the other loot drops and found the Ice King's crown that she needed. That's one down, only 9 more to go, she thought to herself. Looking at the other corpses, she shrugged off the fact that she didn't get any more set pieces since a full set would increase its value. However, since she had 9 more runs to go, she had more than enough time to farm for the items. Teleporting out of the dungeon, Shiro jumped back in to kill the bosses once more. Running through the dungeon over and over again, her clearing speed became incredible since she was able to exploit their weaknesses the moment they fought. Naturally, she managed to bag herself some humiliation-type equipment. Umak's Humiliation, Tilfire's Humiliation, Valen's Humiliation, Barius's Humiliation, and last but not least, King Ephium's Humiliation. Of course, the humiliation-type equipment wasn't the only useful item she got. She also managed to get a few more parts to the Imperial Ice set. Unfortunately, she had a few duplicates, so she only managed to collect 4 out of 6 items. Strangely, however, the set didn't give her a set effect at 3 pieces collected, which only meant that the effect will only appear once all 6 sets are gathered. Its power should be much higher when compared to normal set effects. She mused to herself as she was hopping into her 8th run of the dungeon. Quest activated. Ice Age. The once prosperous kingdom of Astia fell into ruin, which resulted in the dead, ice-cold kingdom it is now. Your current role will be randomized, but the main task is to pave a path out of this fate or find the best outcome. Rewards depend on what you do. D rank reward, emergency bag or wish bag, randomized. C rank reward. B rank reward, A rank reward? S rank reward? Quest activated. Ice Age. The once prosperous kingdom of Astia fell into ruin, which resulted in the dead, ice-cold kingdom it is now. Your current role will be randomized, but the main task is to pave a path out of this fate or find the best outcome. Rewards depend on what you do. D rank reward, emergency bag or wish bag, randomized. C rank reward, B rank reward, a rank reward, S rank reward. So the people in this city have only managed to earn the D ranked reward? None have passed the C ranked. Shiro muttered while holding her chin. Pulling out the spell book that Nadhash had given her, which in reality was just a notepad, Shiro wrote down a few key notes. First, the kingdom will collapse. I need to find ways to avoid this outcome. From what I can guess, if I just tell people to evacuate, I'll just get the D-ranked reward, meaning I need to take care of what actually caused the kingdom to collapse in the first place. Currently, she was floating in empty space as she waited for her role to be randomized. Untying her hairband, Shiro allowed her hair to flow freely while she kept the band on her wrist. She didn't know the time period of the quest, so she needed to make sure that she wouldn't stand out too much. Quickly changing into a simple white dress, Shiro stored away all the other accessories. Looking down at herself, Shiro nodded in satisfaction since she would fit into most timelines right now without standing out too much. Just as she blinked, she noticed that she was in the middle of a road. She muttered in confusion. Move out of the way. Someone shouted out behind her. Quickly hopping to the side, Shiro looked towards the person who shouted at her and noticed that he was currently riding on a horse carriage. The man was shocked seeing her face. Sorry for shouting. He apologized before continuing on his way. Of course, he would turn around and glance at her a few more times. As for Shiro, she realized that the clothes he wore was rather well made. If she needed to describe it, it would be a mix of both medieval and modern clothing. Seems like it would be fine if I use my normal outfit and glasses, Shiro thought to herself as she checked the system to find out about her role. You are a traveling scholar who was tasked to be the private tutor of the king's youngest daughter, Lysandra Vale. So I'm a private tutor, Shiro muttered. Since she was given this role, there were going to be things to prove her identity. Checking in her bag, she saw Een, still in her egg form, while being next to a few books and a card of sorts. Name, Shiro. Profession, S-rank tutor. Next to this was a picture of her face. How in the hell do they even print stuff? Shiro raised an eyebrow as she looked back at the city in front of her. Just looking at the architecture and vehicles told her that they didn't have the technology to make such an advanced card, never mind printing an image. Forget it. This is only a system quest. She sighed and shrugged her shoulders. She tried to access her inventory but frowned when she realized that she couldn't do anything with her inventory. She couldn't take anything out nor put anything in. It was as if the inventory was sealed off entirely. Seems like I can't use the inventory in this quest. No matter. She thought to herself, since unlike other people, she can create her weapons and armor on the spot. Since she now understood her role along with a rough idea of what she's tasked with, Shiro made her way to the main gate. Unfortunately, she had to wait in line since the soldiers were checking all of the things that people were bringing into the city. Waiting patiently in line, she took this chance to scan her surroundings a little. Most of the people here are below level 10. A single kick from me would kill them, she thought, looking at the people that were queuing up with her. Glancing over at the soldiers, she saw that they were a little better considering the fact that they were on average level 20, with a few reaching level 25. For gate guards, they're not too bad, I guess. Since the mission was level 50, she expected high-level people straight away. However, it also made sense in the way that not everyone could class up. Plus, one would normally assign high-level guards to protect the important personnel in the heart of the city, so the outer walls would naturally be weakened. Once it was her turn to get checked, Shiro handed over her bag. After making sure that the contents were all right, they asked for her ID. When they saw it was Shiro, one of them whispered to the other and brought over another armed soldier. However, his armor was a little more decorative. So it's the esteemed Miss Shiro, the only S-rank tutor in the country. I welcome you into the city of Astia. The king has been waiting eagerly, he said with a slight bow. Hey, you know of me? Shiro chuckled slightly. Of course. Everyone at or above the rank of captain has been informed to treat you with respect should we see you. Plus, those who see you are tasked with showing you to the king himself. Follow me, please. He smiled. Grabbing her bag, Shiro walked behind the captain while he led her through the city. A few kids would pause and look at her for long periods of time due to her beauty. Shiro would only smile and wave lightly to the kids that looks at her. Miss Shiro seemed to enjoy interacting with children. The captain smiled. Well, they're cute when they're young. Shiro chuckled. Indeed. The captain nodded in agreement. They talked for a little while on their way to the castle so that it wasn't awkwardly silent. Captain Richard's requests an audience with the king. I've brought over Miss Shiro, the S-rank tutor, he said to the guards at the gate. Hearing his request, the guards passed on the message. After waiting for a short moment, they told them that only Shiro was needed. See you around? Shiro smiled. Same to you, Miss Shiro. The captain nodded before returning back to his post. Two guards gestured for her to follow them as they escorted her to the main hall. This is indeed the same place. She thought to herself. These corridors were naturally familiar to her since she had cleared the dungeon several times now. Asterisk bang. Slamming the pommel of their spears into the ground, the two escorts waited by the gate. Goodness, you didn't need to scare me. Shiro patted her chest in a joking manner. Pushing open the giant set of doors, Shiro saw 2 rows of soldiers leading up to the king and queen who were both level 50. As for the soldiers, they were around level 40. Looking at both the king and queen, Shiro was a little surprised by their youthfulness but didn't pay too much attention to it. Your Highness. Shiro smiled slightly and gave him a small wave. All of the soldiers frowned when they heard how she had greeted their king. However, when they looked over, their complaint instantly faded away. Just looking at her smile that wasn't burdened by anything made their bodies feel light. Even the 2 royalties ignored how she had greeted them as they were inspecting her. Both of them couldn't believe how beautiful she was. It seems like rumors are not to be trusted. You're more beautiful than the rumors state. The king praised slightly. I believe that it's better for one to check for themselves rather than trusting in rumors that could be falsified. Shiro replied. Indeed. I shall cut the pleasantries since I believe every second is important for you. Bring in my youngest daughter. The king ordered. Just as he laid down this order, the gates opened once more to reveal a young teen with her hair tied up into a ponytail. She had golden eyes along with light blue hair. Wearing a modest combat dress, she had a sword hung on her waist. Is she my new teacher? Will she leave like the others because they're weak? She huffed whilst glaring at Shiro. Shiro raised her eyebrows seeing her attitude. Please excuse my daughter. Her personality had been like this since she was young. The king smiled apologetically. No worries, no worries. Shiro chuckled. Oi, you don't feel strong. In fact, I don't feel anything, so that means you must be very weak. Lysandra called out to Shiro. She can get a grasp on other people's strength? Shiro wondered to herself whilst glancing at her stats. Lysandra LVL 22. Imperial Magic Swordswoman. I like to believe that I'm strong. It's just that I'm suppressing myself right now. Shiro chuckled as she rubbed her nose. The best way to pacify people like Lysandra, in her opinion, was to prove that you are more capable than her. Lies. Humph. Even father's guards have an aura when they suppress themselves. But you don't. Lysandra shook her head. Is it okay if I do a small demonstration, Your Highness? Shiro asked, glancing back at the king. Go ahead, I allow it. The king smiled since Shiro was the only tutor left that could possibly handle his daughter. The other tutors were completely overwhelmed by her in terms of magic and swordsmanship. If the rumors are true, she should be a master of both swordsmanship and magic. He thought whilst narrowing his eyes. Let's see, how about I stop controlling my aura so that you can feel it yourself? Shiro smiled. What do you dash? Before she could even continue her words, a horrific burst of pressure erupted out from Shiro. Fear overwhelmed the guards as they readied their weapons instantly. their face pale with fright as sweat dripped from their hands onto their weapons. "Phew, that should be fine, right?" Shiro chuckled as she suppressed her aura once more. Lysandra was currently sitting on the floor since her legs gave up under her. Trying to stand up, she was shocked to see that her strength seemed to have disappeared. Why can't I move?" she asked as her voice quivered slightly. "I believe your body is reacting to my strength." "Fufufu, does that prove I'm strong now?" Shiro smiled. Turning around to see a pale king and queen along with frightful guards, Shiro coughed slightly. "Was that a little too much?" Shiro asked whilst scratching her cheeks a little. "You call that a little?" They cried out in their minds since it was like a powerful monster suddenly descended in the middle of the hall. They weren't wrong, but they didn't know that. "So what will I be teaching her, and what's my payment?" Shiro asked with a smile. "Naturally, your reward will be spellbooks and research papers. As for what you would be teaching Lysandra, please direct her on the matters regarding swordsmanship and magic," the king said after adjusting himself. "Is that all?" Shiro frowned slightly when she heard that her reward would be spellbooks and research papers. "Of course, if you find that lacking, I'll try my best to compensate." The king corrected himself quickly. "How about access to the library and all the books that the royal family owns?" "I won't take any of them, of course. I'll just read them in my spare time." "Easy request. Are there anything else?" How about a daily supply of mana stones since I wish to conduct research in my spare time as well?" "I lied. They're my daily meals." Shiro thought to herself. Since she couldn't access her inventory, that meant her food supply was also cut off. "Also easy. Oh, and one last thing, I promise. Can I get a change of clothes? I forgot to pack some outfits for myself when I left." "Of course. Just follow the maids." The king nodded and gestured for the maids to take her to get a change of clothes. Watching her leave, the king sighed and fell limp on his throne. "My king, are you okay?" the queen asked with worry. "What do you think?" He smiled tiredly. "Even though our power has declined to D rank, we still have the experience of being C rank. However, just feeling her aura then made me feel like I was looking up at an unscalable wall. Not only that, it felt eerily similar to the feeling I got when we fought against monsters." The king sighed as he covered his eyes. If Lysandra could be taught by her, there's no doubt that she'll grow much stronger than we can imagine. "Do you think it's enough, my king? Isn't it dangerous to have someone like Shiro around her as well, though?" the queen asked since she knew the potential danger that Shiro could bring. "I can only hope that it's enough. We've been constantly sieged by the demons for years now. I can tell that they've been growing stronger every year while we've lost promising men every battle. With someone like Lysandra holding potential greater than all that we've seen, I can only hope that she's the one to save us all." Looking outside the windows, the king couldn't help but sigh at the fate of his kingdom. Stretching her body in front of the mirror, Shiro smiled with satisfaction. The outfit that the maids gave her was that of a mage robe combined with some accessories and a cloak. Tying up her hair into a ponytail, she grabbed one of the glasses that the maids had provided. "I swear the technology in this place is *king everywhere," she mused to herself. It was a weird mix of advanced tech and medieval tech. Shaking her head, stored everything in a bracelet that had its own inventory. "Is everything satisfactory, Miss Shiro?" the maid asked. "Yes, it is, thank you." Shiro smiled. Making her way back to the main hall, Shiro saw Lysandra waiting by the door. However, this time she seemed tamer. "Teacher." She bowed with an embarrassed blush on her face. "I'm sorry for behaving rudely before," she continued as Shiro didn't expect this from her. "It's all right." "So what are you teaching me today?" she asked with excitement in her eyes. "Aren't we supposed to talk to your royal father?" "Nah, forget about him. Let's get training straight away." She smiled widely and grabbed Shiro by the hand. Pulling her away, Lysandra wasn't able to suppress the adrenaline that was bubbling up inside her. The maid watched Lysandra pull Shiro away with a soft chuckle. "Princess seems to be quite content with Miss Shiro," she muttered as the guards nodded their heads. As the youngest member of the royal family, Lysandra was doted upon by everyone in the castle. However, she herself didn't want that hence, she took up swordsmanship. But as she continued to use the sword, she started to enjoy it, and it became her hobby. She enjoyed challenging all of the soldiers in the castle to the point it became a routine. But as the soldiers sparred with her, they slowly realized that they had to become serious as to not embarrass themselves. Before they knew it, Lysandra was already defeating them in spars, even though she's only level 22. The king heard about this predicament and had hired tutors to help her out, but all of them quit midway due to the fact that they simply could not keep up with Lysandra. So seeing someone more capable than Lysandra was a fresh feeling, especially since she hadn't smiled so excitedly for such a long time. Meanwhile, Lysandra had already brought Shiro to the training grounds and threw a sword towards her. "Let's fight." She smiled with anticipation. "Well, sure, why not? I'll see what you can do." Shiro nodded her head and swung the sword a few times to get used to the weight. "Here I come," Lysandra shouted out as she dashed towards her. "Ho, she's fast for a level 22. Shiro thought as she raised her sword up to parry. However, just as her sword was about to collide with Lysandra's sword, Lysandra's eyes glowed slightly before her body halted in mid-air and transferred her attack into an uppercut that countered Shiro's guard. Asterisk dang. Lysandra widened her eyes in joy when she saw Shiro adjust herself quickly to block the sword. Asterisk dang 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 dang. Swinging her sword continuously, Lysandra never felt so happy before. She could tell that Shiro was able to block her sword with ease. A little rough around the corners, but not bad. Not bad at all. Shiro smiled while casually parrying one of Lysandra's attacks. "But is your defense up to par?" She chuckled. Stomping down on her foot, Shiro broke Lysandra's guard by flicking her sword upwards. Bringing her hand towards her face, Shiro narrowed her eyes as she aimed the sword towards Lysandra and pierced towards her. With her sword still flying through the air, Lysandra knew that she had to do something fast. "Ha!" Aiming her palm downwards, she released a blast of air that propelled her upwards towards her sword. "Not bad, but could be better." Shiro smiled. Flicking her sword so that the tip aimed towards Lysandra, she kicked the pommel and sent the sword flying towards Lysandra, who was still flying through the air. Instincts overwhelmed Lysandra as she flipped her body over and grabbed the handle of the sword. "Heh, she's kind of like Lyrica in a way," Shiro thought, seeing Lysandra rely on her body's instincts. Lysandra grabbed her sword that was sent flying by Shiro and narrowed her eyes. With both swords in hand, she landed on the ground harshly. The blades of the swords started to glow as she dashed toward Shiro. "You forget that I'm a mage as well," Shiro chuckled. Flexing her fingers, a glacial ice wall erected between them. Asterisk bang bang. The force of the swords colliding with the wall caused a small pulse of air to explode outwards, surprising Shiro with her level of strength. Did she use a berserk skill? She thought to herself. Just as Lysandra was about to jump back, ice bars shot out of the ground and locked her in with no way of escaping. Frowning slightly, she slashed towards one of the bars only for the sword to be repelled instantly. "Lysandra," Shiro called out as she dismissed the ice wall. "You are a magic swordswoman, are you not? Why aren't you adding more magic to your fighting style?" Shiro asked curiously. I only know a few spells. For some reason, I'm not really compatible with other magic," Lysandra replied as she sheathed her sword away, understanding that Shiro had completely overwhelmed her. "Now then, I'll give you two choices. Either you become the most extreme of swordsmanship, or I teach you some magic and balance things out a little. Right now, you're basically a swordswoman that can use a little magic. Nothing special even though your class is magic swordswoman. Your potential is being wasted," Shiro offered. Lysandra stood still for a moment as she contemplated about the choices she was given. "What are you best at, Shiro?" Lysandra asked. "Me? Personally, I'm best at fighting mid to close range. So melee," Shiro replied. "Then can you teach me melee fighting, please?" "Sure, though we'll stop for now. I want to plan out what I want to teach first, okay?" Shiro smiled. "Of course." Lysandra nodded her head. "See you tomorrow, Shiro." She smiled and jogged back to the castle. Does that girl do everything at 100% enthusiasm? She muttered with a soft smile. Even while saying goodbye, Lysandra was still active. Shaking her head, Shiro narrowed her eyes as she was going to start investigating what could have potentially caused the downfall of this kingdom. Ever since coming to this quest world, Shiro noticed that she could use all of her skills, even Nanomancer, meaning she could leave devices around the place and listen to any gossip that would drift around. Naturally, that involved the main throne room where she heard the king talk about how the demons were constantly sieging this kingdom. Looking towards the castle, Shiro narrowed her eyes as her body flickered away. She wasn't going to question the king and queen just yet since she wanted to understand some background information first. The best way for her to find out about this would be the library since there were bound to be some history books that may inform her about what had been happening. However, as she was flickering towards the castle, she paused in mid-air as she realized something important. Where in the flying F***CK is the library? She asked no one in particular. Holding her chin in deep thought, Shiro ignored the fact that she was currently falling towards the ground. Ah! One of the maids suddenly screamed when she saw Shiro suddenly land in front of her. Do you know where the library is? Shiro asked with a soft smile. Looking at the now-known royal tutor, the maid didn't know how to react to her question since she literally fell from the sky. Hello? Shiro waved her hand after seeing the maid pause in a daze. Orm, the way to the library is just down the corridor. You'll see a sign telling you where to go, she replied after snapping out of her daze. Thank you. Shiro smiled before flickering away. Arriving at a hallway with several doors lined up, she eventually found her way to the library. Miss Shiro, what brings you to the library? One of the guards inquired. Everyone in the castle knew about the royal tutor and her unmatched beauty. Just browsing, don't mind me, Shiro said, giving him a small wave. Walking around the library, she craned her head up and saw that it was something akin to a tower of knowledge. There were ledges showing all the different floors. From what she could tell, there were more than 20 floors from what she could see. Well, damn, she muttered. How am I even supposed to find the book I need amongst all of these? She wondered. Shaking her head, she looked for anything that might help her and eventually stumbled upon a guide of sorts. It labeled what each of the floors contain. Of course, it was only a general outlook on what they may have, and not all of the books, otherwise the guide would be huge. Seems like history is on the 17th floor, Shiro muttered as she looked towards the 17th floor. Placing the guide back where she found it, she crouched down for a moment before launching herself upwards. Crouching on one of the railings, she reinforced it with nanobots before jumping up once more. Landing on the 17th floor without too much trouble, she looked at some of the books available. World history, Basinium history, Elf history, Pharisha history, she muttered while scanning through all of the books. However, she frowned when she felt a presence hid itself in the shadows. Why are you even watching me? I'll let you go this time. Tell the king that I don't really like having people follow me, Shiro said as the guard hidden in the shadows paused in shock. How did she notice me? He thought in confusion. Did you not hear me the first time? Do you want me to repeat myself? Shiro narrowed her eyes as she flickered in front of the person. Slashing towards her on instinct, the guard fell backwards in shock. *ping. The dagger shattered into ice dust as Shiro casually blew on it with icy breath. It was just a simple green-gray dagger, nothing special. Well? Shiro asked against after there were no reply. You understood. The guard nodded his head quickly as he left in a hurry. Once she was sure that she was alone, Shiro sighed before grabbing a few books that may be useful. Sitting down on a chair, she leaned back before opening the book. Quickly flipping through the books, Shiro started to yawn when she found nothing useful. Heis. She sighed as there was only one book left. Flipping through the last book, she craned her head back after finding nothing useful. Do I have to try to negotiate for information without knowing anything? She thought to herself since it wasn't a gamble that she liked to take. A few more books. She concluded. While she did get some decent information from the books, it could be summarized into a few key points. The demons are invading every 2 years. They wish to take this kingdom as a stronghold for the rest of their army. Once this kingdom falls, the other kingdoms will be next. However, she knew that this was the information allowed to the public due to the fact that this library was akin to the main hub. All the books the citizens have are copied from this archive. Asterisk bang. Shutting the book in her hands, Shiro glanced out of the window to check the time. The day is still young. I should be able to sneak into the private library of the king if he has one, she muttered. Flexing her fingers, a device appeared in her palms. It was a similar device to the one she had used to find out about the hidden tunnels used by Black Monarchy back in New York. However, unlike the one she made before, this one was more powerful and had a much bigger range. Placing it on the library wall, she allowed it to send pulses through the entire castle. Soon, a 3D map could be seen in front of her. So the king does have one, though the private library is in a hidden chamber inside his room. I'll need to be quick, she muttered before leaving the library. Making sure that no one saw her, Shiro jumped onto the roof and flickered towards the king's bedroom. She would send out small pulses of mana, hardly detectable to the soldiers, and avoid them with ease due to the fact that she knew their positions. Arriving in front of the king's bedroom without anyone noticing, Shiro activated Riftwalker and snuck into the hidden chamber. Fufu, let's see what secrets you hold. She chuckled as she looked towards the stack of books on a bookshelf next to a desk. Flipping open the books, Shiro started to frown when she saw some of their contents. Verkus, a race of battle-hungry parasites that would reanimate a person's corpse. Gastus, demons that are made from gas and corpses. Very hard to kill due to their resistance against physical attacks. One must use magic to kill them. Igni Colossus, giant demons that will fire flaming rocks towards their enemies. Phantas, shadow demons that assassinate strong soldiers through the battlefield. Krana, the demon equivalent of a mage. Possess powerful life-draining abilities that makes them hard to kill. Reading about the 5 main types of enemies that the kingdom has to face, Shiro couldn't help but frown. Unless the monsters themselves are low-level, there is no way that this kingdom could have survived this long. She thought to herself. She had encountered monsters that held similar properties and knew how annoying they could be at a high level. They were something common soldiers could take care of. Not to mention, the Verkus would just reanimate the dead corpses on the battlefield in order to replenish their soldiers. Hence, it was a bad idea to constantly fight an ongoing battle with them. A single sweep of the battlefield after war would be enough for them to recuperate. Not only that, one would need to keep the mindset that they could potentially kill the corpse of their friend. Flipping through the books, Shiro's frown deepened as she continued to read. Asterisk bang. Shutting the final book, Shiro sighed and leaned backwards. The demons are constantly invading this kingdom is due to the fact that this is literally the final intact barrier node that's protecting the continent. With a total of 10 nodes spread out through the continent, different kingdoms need to protect the nodes. 9 have already fallen, and the high-level adventurers were currently holding back the demons on 9 different battlefields. They left this place under the supervision of the king, due to the fact that he was one of the strongest out of all the adventurers. However, after some unknown accident, his level was decreased to 50 with no hope of recovering. Currently, they're walking the thin line of life and death. Every year, the demons come closer to defeating them. They've managed to hold them off for now, but the previous war had been extremely close. Shiro thought whilst glancing up at the ceiling. Massaging her eyes, she started to try to formulate a plan in her head. The demons will be invading in around a month's time in this world. That means I have a month to reach level 50 and to help Lysandra improve since she's apparently the only one that can save this kingdom. Hopping off the chair, Shiro put the books back to their original locations. But first, I'll need to have a small talk with the king and understand the full situation. Flickering out of the room, Shiro stood on the root of the castle and sent her senses out. It took her a while, but she soon found the king's mana signature not too far from where she was currently. Seems like he's making his way back to his room, she muttered. The queen was just behind him, so she could also ask her some questions if she needed. Jumping off the roof, she entered the rift and made her way towards the duo. Care to have a small chat? Shiro asked as she appeared beside the duo just before they opened the door to their room. Freezing up in surprise, the king couldn't believe that Shiro was able to get so close to them without him noticing. "It's rather late. How about we talk tomorrow?" The king smiled. "Nah, I'd like to talk now. What's the situation like in regards to defending against the demons?" Shiro asked in seriousness. "What do you dash? Don't give me that crap. If you're putting your hope into your daughter that's only level 22, then I'm guessing the situation's pretty serious." Shiro interrupted. "How do? Never mind. Come in. We don't want to have anyone eavesdrop on us." The king shook his head as he gestured for her to sit on one of the sofas that was in his room. Sitting down, Shiro faced both the king and queen with a passive face. "So, am I going to probe everything out of you, or are you going to tell me?" she asked. "What do you want to know?" "First, what is up with Lysandra? Her overall strength is too high for a level 22. It's not normal." Shiro asked seriously. "Lysandra's class is hidden. Not even she knows what class she has since I used an item to disguise it. When the time is right, it will reveal itself." "Then can you tell me the class?" Shiro frowned since she had a theory on the class. "No, I cannot. It's better left unknown for now." "Fine. Second question. What's the average level of the army and how many people do you have left?" She was going to put aside Lysandra's class for now, since she could tell that the king was adamant about keeping it a secret. "The average level is, 30. As for the number of soldiers we have, it's less than 100,000 men. Compared to the demon army that has been consistently numbered at around 250,000, I'm afraid this is the last year we can hold off for. Unless we can get Lysandra to level 50 in time, the best course of action will be to evacuate everyone." The king shook his head. "And I'm guessing that's why you got me to teach your daughter." Shiro leaned back and crossed her legs. "Indeed. While you are only level 48, the experience and danger I felt from you was definitely more than what a level 48 should have, if anything. I suspect that you're the same as me, taken down from your prime, and had to try to work your way back up." "Well, you're not wrong about that." Shiro chuckled slightly since she was a tier 6 legend before. But now, she was turned into a level 48 snow girl. "How many high-level people do we have in the kingdom?" she asked. "None that are over level 50. They've all died during the last battle." What about hiring mercenaries from outside of the kingdom?" "We don't have enough resources for that. Plus, they're untrustworthy." The queen shook her head. This is rather difficult." Shiro frowned. Her quest wants her to solve the issue regarding the kingdom's downfall. She had two choices: either get them all to evacuate and get the lowest grade, or she could train the hell out of Lysandra and have her repel the invasion. "I'm going to take Lysandra out of the kingdom for some training in the demon continent. If we stay inside and shield her from danger, we can't explore her potential," Shiro concluded. "You can't. What if a high-level demon finds you?" The king instantly rejected her idea. "Well, it's either that, or we can wait in here with no guarantees of getting Lysandra to reach level 50. Shiro retorted. "Plus, I'm confident in protecting Lysandra from the dangers that may come." She had several skills that would allow her to run away with Lysandra in moments of danger, such as Riftwalker. Not only that, if the situation truly calls for it, she still had the Calamity Dragon Scale and the Silver Dagger which Yuan Tian gave her. Both items will boost her power up temporarily for her to kill whatever was in her way. "You can tell me that all you want, but I still can't risk it." The king shook his head. "Then how can I prove it?" The king stayed silent. You know what, ever heard of Hercules?" Shiro asked with a grin. She remembers reading about Hercules in her spare time and remembered his 12 labors. "I don't think I have." "Well, it's a story about a hero back from where I live. He was a warrior that was given 12 tasks by the king to prove his strength. Why don't we do something similar? Give me 12 tasks that I need to do, and I'll do them by sundown tomorrow." Shiro smiled. "So you're saying that you want me to give you 12 tasks for you to do in order to prove that you can look after my daughter?" The king raised his eyebrow. "Why not, dear? It is also a good chance for Lysandra to know what Shiro is capable of." The wife encouraged. Very well. I'll give you some tasks that had been bothering me. While it may not be 12 tasks as you have said, I believe it should prove to be quite hard for you to complete." The king nodded after a short moment. After hearing the king's response, Shiro smiled, knowing that her plan was slowly progressing. Since she needed to completely get rid of the source in order for her to get a rank higher than C, she would need the king's support. It wasn't feasible for her to take care of an army the size of 250,000 soldiers. Plus, that wasn't taking care of the source but rather treating the symptoms. All that it will accomplish was postpone the destruction to a later date. Not to mention the fact that if Lysandra was their so-called hope, why were they still destroyed in the end? That could only mean that Lysandra wasn't able to take care of the enemy. I can also use this time to level up as well, Shiro thought to herself, since she was very close to level 50. Standing up, the king walked over to the table and started to write down something on a sheet of paper. Putting down the pen, he handed the sheet to Shiro. Slay the wyvern in Harrow's Edge. Recover the Imperium sword from the Quinn Mountain bandits. Bring the heads of Redur, Xerix, and Pilgrim, the demon generals. Only 3 tasks? Shiro raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting more from him. These 3 will prove if you clearly have the capabilities. The wyvern and Harrow's Edge have been constantly attacking the outside villages, and we aren't able to do much about it due to the fact that we can't afford to spare any decent-sized squadrons. Plus, if we just send it a weak squad, they'll just die for nothing. As for the Imperium sword, it is a treasure that was left behind by the previous generations. Unfortunately, the sword was stolen by my brother's son who had traded it to the bandits. As it stands, I'm not able to do anything about the bandits since the power of the sword makes him a hard target. Plus, the moment the sword takes blood from the imperial lineage, it will gain a significant power boost for a short moment. Finally, the heads of the 3 generals are the ones who directed the previous battle. If we're able to take care of them, we should be able to create some turmoil inside the army. The king explained. Sure, I don't see any problems. Shiro smiled. The sword could be recovered easily if she's careful. As for the wyvern and the 3 demon generals, they may be a little harder due to the fact that they may be higher than level 50. Give me a map of their general direction and I'll make my way over there now. Who knows, I may even get them done before sunrise. Shiro chuckled. Just know that you aren't required to do these. You can still train Lysandra without taking such risks, he said, shaking his head. Don't worry about it. Just hand me the map and I'll get them done. Plus, I don't risk my life since I have a backup plan. If you insist. Walking back to his desk, the king pulled out a map and marked out where all the tasks are located. As for the location for the final task, the demon generals, he could only mark out the estimated area since they weren't able to pin out their exact location. Thank you. Shiro smiled as she received the map. Entering the rift, she left the room instantly. How does she even do that? The king muttered in confusion since her entire presence disappeared in an instant. It wasn't like the assassin's stealth since he could still somewhat track where they are. But for Shiro, it was as if she entered another dimension. Little did he know that it was exactly what she did. Meanwhile, Shiro was already dashing towards the Harrow's Edge to kill the wyvern. While it wasn't a dragon, wyvern was still valued as a high-grade commodity. Meaning, if I killed the wyvern then cooked its meat, I should be able to get a few stat points in STR and AGI. Who knows, maybe my INT will increase as well. Shiro muttered with an excited grin. All of the monsters she had met before were rather low-classed, so their meat wouldn't give her any decent increments. But it wasn't the same for wyverns. Plus, she couldn't wait to sink her teeth into some meat that actually had some taste. Maybe I can make a dragon skewer to roast in an open fire. I do have the skill combust, so I can cook the meat. Meanwhile, a certain wyvern was sleeping soundlessly, unaware of the danger that's to come.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.